I sat at the dinner table with my right arm in a cast, barely able to hold my fork, while my son-in-law carved the roast like a king in my late husband's chair. My daughter leaned over and whispered, "You see, Mama, my husband finally taught you a lesson." And everyone around that table just kept chewing, like it was normal to let the woman who owns the house sit there with an empty plate. But what they didn't know was that while they laughed and fed each other lies, I had already set something in motion that none of them could stop. Friends, before we dive into this story, I want to ask for a small favor. If you're listening, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you're watching from. It means a lot, and it helps more people hear stories like mine. Let's begin. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, heart pounding, sweat gathering at the base of my neck. Troy was standing close, too close, the condo deed waving in his hand like a weapon. His breath hit my face, sharp with whiskey and rage. "Sign it, Denise," he barked, spit catching on the corner of his mouth. "This is our place now. I just need to square things with a few people, that's it." I stared at the paper, then up at him, searching for the boy I once tried to trust for my daughter's sake. He wasn't there. Just this man, wild-eyed and shaking. I gripped the doorframe with my good hand, trying to hold on to my calm, even as every part of me screamed to run. "I'm not signing anything," I told him. "This is my home. You don't get to take it." My voice trembled, but I meant every word. The next second happened fast. His face twisted into something cruel, and he shoved me, hard. I didn't even think. Years of training kicked in. I raised my right arm to shield my face, just like I'd done with patients under attack in the ER. But this time, I wasn't protecting someone else. I was trying to protect myself. Then I heard it. A sharp, unmistakable crack. Not a pop, not a sprain. A clean break. The kind that shoots straight through the bone and lights up your whole body. I went down fast, knees giving out beneath me. The pain didn't come all at once. At first, it was just a shock, like stepping into ice water. Then it hit like fire, pulsing up from my wrist to my shoulder, searing hot and impossible to ignore. My breath caught in my throat. I was on the floor, staring at Troy's shoes. He cursed and stepped back like I'd thrown myself down. "You did this to yourself," he snapped, like I was the crazy one. "All because you're too damn stubborn." I cradled my arm with my good hand, already knowing the damage was bad. I felt the bone moving wrong, unstable. I'd seen enough broken arms to know what I was dealing with. But more than the pain, more than the humiliation of being knocked down in my own hallway, what burned most was the betrayal. This man was in my house, and my daughter, the child I raised, the girl I worked nights for and skipped meals for, had let him in. Worse, she stood by him. My brain raced as I tried to sit up. Troy loomed over me, fists clenched like he wasn't finished yet, and I flinched without meaning to. That only seemed to rile him up more. "You think you can humiliate me?" he hissed. "You think you still get to control things?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The pain was crawling up my spine, into my head, making everything spin. And then he grabbed me again. He yanked me by the arm, not the broken one, thank God, and dragged me down the hall like I was a sack of laundry. I cried out, more from shock than anything else, and tried to plant my feet, but he was stronger. I kicked at the floor, caught a corner of the rug, and felt my hips slam into the wall. He didn't care. He opened the door to the guest room and shoved me inside. Before I could even catch my breath, he reached behind the TV and yanked the phone cord clean from the wall. My landline, gone in a second. Then he turned and held out his hand. "Your cell," he demanded. I hesitated. He lunged. I didn't have the strength to fight, not like this. I pulled it from my robe pocket and threw it across the bed. He snatched it, checked it, then stuffed it in his back pocket. "Now you've got all night to think about how you're going to fix this," he said, slamming the door shut. The click of the lock was louder than I expected. It echoed. It rang in my ears like the last note of a funeral song. I sank onto the bed, shaking from adrenaline, from fury, from pain I hadn't even begun to process. My cast hadn't even been put on yet, but I knew I'd need one. I knew I'd need a hospital, X-rays, real treatment. But more than anything, I knew I needed help. Real help. Not the kind that comes from asking your daughter to step in, because Kendra wasn't coming. I knew that now. I'd seen the look in her eyes when she told me to go easy on Troy, like I was the problem. I had ignored the warning signs, brushed them off, told myself I was just being protective. But there was no more denying what was in front of me. The man she married was violent, and she was letting him stay that way. Sitting there, rocking slightly on the edge of the bed, like a woman trying not to fall apart, I realized something that chilled me. Troy wasn't just a loudmouth. He wasn't just a manipulator. He was dangerous. And I'd let him inch closer to my life, into my home, because I didn't want to break my daughter's heart. Because I wanted peace. Because I thought, maybe if I kept quiet, things would get better. But now my arm was broken, my phone was gone, my door was locked, and I was alone. The denial was gone. Denial was... All that was left was truth and pain, real pain, physical, emotional, spiritual. It was all tangled up in my chest, and under it all, something new was blooming. Not fear exactly, not yet, but something close. A quiet, growing knowledge that I was in more danger than I had ever let myself admit, and that no one, not even my own blood, was coming to save me. I looked around the room, my eyes landing on the sewing table by the window. My right arm throbbed, each beat of my heart sending sharp little flares through the cast. But my mind was already moving ahead, thinking, planning. I didn't cry. Not then. There wasn't time. I knew what Troy didn't. I knew that inside that old sewing box, tucked beneath the spools and needles, was something he hadn't taken. An old prepaid flip phone, the kind you keep in case of hurricanes. And I knew someone who owed me a favor. Someone who wouldn't hesitate. I didn't reach for it yet. I needed the pain to dull just a little, needed to focus. But something had shifted inside me. That fear that had settled in my chest, it was still there. But next to it, something else had taken root. A quiet resolve. A whisper that said, "You've been a nurse for 30 years, Denise. You've stopped bleeding with less than this. Now stop the bleeding in your own life. Start right now." The door didn't budge when I tried the handle again. Locked, like I already knew, but I still had to check. I sat down carefully on the edge of the bed, the mattress sagging under me, my right arm screaming with every heartbeat. The cast was fresh, the kind the ER slaps on in a rush. Not fitted right, still too tight in places. I pressed my back against the wall, stared at the door like maybe I could will it open. Troy had turned the living room TV up loud before slamming the door, and now I could hear voices and laughter drifting through. Some stupid sitcom playing like this was just another night. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. Slow in, slow out. I'd said it 1,000 times to patients in pain, in shock, in trauma. Now I said it to myself. My chest ached from how hard I was holding everything in. I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. I needed my mind clear. I needed a plan. I slid off the bed and crouched awkwardly, using my left hand to drag the storage bin from underneath. It was heavier than I remembered. My fingers fumbled at the lid, but I finally got it open. Pill bottles, gauze rolls, syringes in sealed plastic, all from the days when I still had a license and liked to be prepared. I pulled out an old pain injection and didn't think twice. The expiration date was years past, but I knew what I was doing. I found the vein in my thigh and jabbed the needle in. It stung, burned a little. But the warmth that came after wasn't just from the drug, it was from the decision. The refusal to sit in this room and wait to be hurt again. I leaned back against the bed frame, letting the pain ease just enough for my thoughts to line up. Troy thought I was helpless. He thought taking my phone, my landline, my arm, meant he'd taken everything. But he forgot one thing. I never threw anything away. My eyes shifted toward the sewing table by the window. I stood up too fast and had to brace myself as my knees nearly gave. My arm knocked the corner of the dresser, and white-hot pain shot through my whole body. I bit down on a cry and kept moving. The drawer on the sewing table was jammed, but I wedged it open and started digging. Under the old fabric scraps, beneath a tin of buttons and needles, my hand found it. Cold. Heavy for its size. My hurricane backup. The prepaid flip phone I'd bought 10 years ago just in case the power ever went out and the world stopped spinning. I sat down slowly, the phone resting in my palm like something sacred. I opened it. Battery still had charge. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the numbers. I should have called 911 right away. It would have made sense. But the thought of officers showing up, reports being filed, my grandbaby's faces splashed across the news if it got ugly, it made my chest tighten. I needed something else. My fingers scrolled through the old contact list, names I hadn't looked at in years. Some of them were dead now. Some I hadn't spoken to since Gerald's funeral. I almost missed it. The name tucked between Malik, Car Repair, and Mama's Pharmacy. Malcolm Rivers. I stared at it for a long moment. My heart thudded in my chest, not out of fear, but something else. I saw his face the way I'd last seen it in person. 18, bleeding out on my table, barely hanging on while I yelled orders and refused to let him die. I remembered his eyes when he came back 6 months later, clean-cut, quiet, said thank you with a college acceptance letter in his hand. I hadn't talked to him in years. Last I heard, he was DA now, district attorney, big job, busy man. But when his name lit up on that old screen, I knew what I was doing. I hit call. The ring sounded 3 times before someone picked up. Rivers, a man's voice said, calm, deep. I hesitated. Malcolm, this is Denise Walker, I said. A pause. Then, Nurse Walker? Softer, like he was pulling me out of memory. My throat went tight. Troy Carter broke my arm, I said. He's my daughter's husband. He locked me in a room. He wants me to sign over the condo. I need help. The silence that followed wasn't hesitation. It was gathering. Where are you? He asked. I told him. He said, I'll come myself. Don't do anything until I get there. When the line clicked off, I didn't cry. I let the phone rest on the bed beside me, hands shaking, but my chest steady. For the first time in hours, I wasn't alone. I sat there staring at the locked door, hearing the sitcom still playing like everything was normal out there. But it wasn't, not anymore. I wasn't the woman I was yesterday, sitting quiet at my own table, hoping for peace. Something had broken open, and not just in my arm. I was done smoothing things over, done trying to keep the family together by bleeding quietly at the edges. I had called someone outside the family, someone who had no reason to protect Troy or Kendra or any of their lies. I'd drawn a line, finally, and I knew there was no going back. My fingers touched the hard edge of the phone again. Troy thought locking a door would keep me quiet, but he forgot I was the kind of woman who keeps extra flashlights, spare batteries, and a backup phone for a storm. And now, the storm was coming for him. O chat GPT disse. The buzzing in my ear from that old flip phone was so loud it felt like it was bouncing off the walls of the room. I had it pressed against the side of my head with my good hand, while my casted arm rested on a pillow in my lap. My heart was pounding so hard I thought Malcolm would hear it when he picked up. The second ring passed, then the third. I almost hung up. Then his voice came through, calm, deeper than I remembered, but still carrying that same respectful tone from all those years ago. Rivers, he said. I swallowed hard. Malcolm, it's Denise Walker. There was a pause. Not long, just enough to twist my gut. Then he said, Nurse Walker? Soft, like I was someone from a dream he wasn't sure was real. My eyes stung right away, but I held it in. I didn't have time to break down. My son-in-law broke my arm, I said, and just like that, it all came spilling out. I gave him the details the same way I would have charted it at the hospital. Mechanism of injury, blunt force, impact from wall after push, defensive wound, time, early evening, location, hallway of my condo, assailant, Troy Carter, witnesses, Kendra Carter, present and non-intervening. I told him Troy had taken my phone, ripped out the landline, locked me in the guest room like I was a piece of furniture he didn't need anymore. I told him I had a fresh cast, but no follow-up, no meds. that I'd given myself an old injection from my emergency stash just to stay conscious. My voice didn't shake until I said the part that felt the most shameful, that I hadn't called the police because I was trying to protect my daughter and her children, that I kept thinking about how this would look, about what it would do to them, even though I was the one with the broken bone. There was a silence on his end, but it wasn't cold. It was him listening, processing, taking it seriously. Then he asked about the condo, if I was the legal owner, and that's when I paused. I hadn't told anyone this, not even Kendra. I took a deep breath. The condo isn't in my name anymore, I said. 10 years ago, I donated it to the hospital foundation. I have a lifetime occupancy clause. I didn't want to leave it to Kendra and start a fight about money, so I never told her. It felt like peeling back a scab. I could hear him typing, asking quiet, precise follow-ups. He wanted paperwork, everything I had. And he wanted to know if I could keep it together long enough to sit through Sunday dinner like nothing was wrong. If we can catch him calm, surrounded by people, it'll be cleaner, he said. I'll bring 2 investigators. Quiet. We'll watch, then step in when it's time. Just the thought of sitting at that table, pretending, made my stomach churn. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my arm, heavy in its cast, swollen and bruised where the fingers poked out. I thought about Troy sitting in my husband's chair, carving meat like he'd earned his place. I thought about Kendra, handing him the salt like nothing had happened. And I thought about the people from his office who were invited to dinner just to watch me be silent, be small. I don't want to be across from him, I whispered. I know, Malcolm said. But if you can do it, we'll have more than your word. We'll have the setting, the witnesses, the lies on record. We can catch it all in one sweep. My chest tightened, and I could hear the blood in my ears again, that awful rushing sound. Can you do that for me, nurse? He asked, quiet, respectful, still seeing me as someone who saves people, someone who makes hard calls under pressure. My mouth was dry, but my voice came steady when I finally said, yes. It felt like a stone dropping inside me, heavy but solid. Final. I didn't recognize the tone in my own voice at first, clear, determined. The part of me that used to take charge in the ER had come up to the surface again, and this time she wasn't patching up other people's wounds. She was protecting herself. I hung up the phone and let it fall onto the bed beside me. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the shift. Something had changed. This wasn't about keeping the peace anymore. It wasn't about saving face or preserving family or hoping Kendra would come to her senses. That woman, the one who put everyone else first, who swallowed the pain, who let herself believe things would get better, she was gone. I sat there in the stillness for a long time. The TV was still humming on the other side of the wall, muffled laughter filling the silence like background noise in a nightmare. But I wasn't frozen anymore. I wasn't sitting on that bed waiting for the next blow, the next humiliation. I had made a call that meant something. I had spoken the truth out loud, and not just to myself, to someone who could act on it, someone who remembered me not as a victim, but as the woman who once saved his life. That connection was a thread, a lifeline. And even though I was still locked in that room, still hurting, I could feel something hard and steady settling in my chest. Not hope, not yet, but direction. I knew what I had to do next, and I would do it, even if it meant sitting across from the man who broke me, pretending I was still breakable. I stood at the stove, stirring the gravy with my left hand, trying to keep it from burning, while the cast on my right arm dragged me off balance. The weight of it made my shoulder ache, but I didn't stop. Troy's laugh boomed from the living room, loud and fake, the kind of laugh a man uses when he wants everyone to think he's in control. He kept telling his coworkers to make themselves at home, like he paid the mortgage, like he'd ever bought so much as a roll of toilet paper in this place. I kept my eyes on the gravy, breathing slow so I didn't snap. Kendra moved around me like a shadow, setting the table and avoiding looking directly at my arm. Every time she repeated that lie, that mama took a little tumble and fell funny on her wrist, I felt my stomach twist. She said it so smoothly, like rehearsing. I could feel anger swelling in my chest, but I swallowed it. I needed to get through this dinner. I needed to hold steady. Still, each lie scraped something raw inside me. When the roast was done, I carried it to the dining room with both hands, balancing it carefully so I wouldn't jar my arm. The room smelled warm and rich, the way Sunday dinner should smell. But nothing felt right. Troy strutted over and pulled out my late husband's chair, his chair, and sat in it without hesitation. The whole table watched him raise his glass. "To discipline," he said, "to respect, and knowing your place." His co-workers chuckled politely, pretending they understood the joke. My plate sat empty in front of me, not a single person reaching to serve me. I stared at my left hand shaking slightly over the table, and my right arm useless in the cast. That roast was my food, my money, my kitchen. But I knew I would starve before I asked one of them to pass me a slice. The humiliation prickled across my skin. I could feel my heart beating in my throat, so loud it drowned out half of Troy's toast. We all started eating. Well, everyone except me. I kept my eyes low, not wanting them to see how tight my jaw had gotten. Troy's co-workers made small talk about office gossip and football scores, pretending everything was normal. Kendra leaned forward and filled Troy's plate again, laughing like this was some family celebration instead of a staged performance he was putting on. My empty plate felt like another message: know your place. My stomach cramped with hunger, but pride is heavier than hunger. I held onto my fork with my left hand, just to give myself something to do, even though there was nothing on my plate to lift. The seconds felt long and sticky, like time itself was trying to trap me there. I could barely feel my fingers from holding myself so still. I thought about Malcolm, about what he had asked me to do, and reminded myself to wait, to hold steady, to breathe. Then Kendra leaned toward me, her voice soft and almost gentle. "You see, Mama, my husband finally taught you a lesson." For a moment, I didn't understand the words. They slipped into my ear like something sweet, but turned bitter as soon as they settled. I looked at her, really looked, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just disappointment. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was a small, sharp heartbreak mixed with something hotter than anything I had allowed myself to feel toward my own daughter. She watched me sit there hungry and broken like it was deserved, like I had earned this seat at the bottom of the ladder in my own home. I felt my face grow warm, not from shame, but from that rising anger I couldn't swallow anymore. And yet I didn't speak. I didn't move. I knew any reaction would ruin the plan. So I sat there, letting her words cut clean through whatever hope I had been holding on to. The worst part wasn't the comment. It was the way Troy smiled afterward. Proud, like Kendra's cruelty was proof that he controlled the room. He leaned back in my husband's chair, stretching his arms wide, showing off his kingdom. I could feel the eyes of his co-workers flick toward me now and then, quick glances full of discomfort they tried to hide. Not one of them stepped in. Not one of them broke the silence. My cheeks burned, but I kept my breathing steady. I told myself, you only need to survive a few more minutes. Just a few. The humiliation washed over me in waves, but underneath it was something tougher: resolve. Every insult made that resolve stronger, the way pouring water over hot metal helps it harden. Let them look. Let them watch. This would be the last time I ever let any of them, family or not, use my house, my heart, or my silence as a weapon. I lifted my eyes to the clock above the mantel. 4 minutes until Malcolm said he would arrive. 4 minutes until everything shifted. I straightened my back, feeling the pain flare through my arm, but refusing to let it bend me. I could hear the rumble of laughter, the scrape of forks, the clink of glasses, but it all faded beneath the ticking of that clock. I kept my gaze steady on it, counting down each second. 3 minutes. 2. I felt my pulse slow instead of quicken. For the first time that day, I felt control curling back into my bones, quiet but certain. Let Troy enjoy the last few sips of his drink. Let Kendra bask in this moment she thought she won. I sat in that humiliation because I knew something they didn't. This was the final time they would ever speak to me like this, treat me like this, look at me like this. When that doorbell rang, everything they thought they controlled would crumble right at their feet. O chat GPT disse: Troy was halfway through one of his dramatic show-off slices of roast when the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the room like a blade. He flinched, his knife clattering onto my good china with no regard for the noise or the plate. I kept my eyes on the table, barely breathing, my left hand clenched in my lap. He wiped his hands on a napkin and muttered something about his real estate lawyer being right on time. Then he swaggered off down the hall, his voice getting louder with every step, like he wanted whoever was on the other side to hear how important he was. I heard the door open, then nothing. A pause long enough to hold my breath, and then, clear and calm, "Good evening, Mr. Carter." Malcolm's voice, cool as a courtroom, no rush, no fear. I didn't lift my head, not yet. I just gripped the edge of the table and waited. I heard the footsteps before I saw them. Malcolm walked in like he belonged there, 2 men in dark suits trailing behind him. The air in the room shifted. Nobody said a word. I finally raised my eyes. Troy stood frozen in the entryway, blinking like he couldn't understand what was happening. His mouth opened to say something, then shut again. He looked like a man caught mid-lie with no backup plan. Malcolm didn't even glance his way. He walked right past him, right past the empty seat Troy had left at the head of the table, and came to stand at mine. He looked at me, not with pity, but with respect, like I was someone worth protecting. Then, without asking, he gently took my plate and began to cut my food into small pieces, slow and careful, like it mattered. I felt every pair of eyes at the table on me, but none of that mattered. Not while Malcolm stood beside me. The first bite he lifted to my lips almost made me cry. Not from shame, though that was there, heavy in my chest, but from the weight of someone seeing me, not ignoring me, not pretending. He didn't feed me like I was weak. He did it like he was serving someone worthy. It silenced the whole room. Even Troy didn't speak. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I didn't look away. I opened my mouth, took the bite, and kept my gaze steady. When Malcolm finished, he set the fork down neatly and turned to the room. "Can someone explain who taught Ms. Walker this lesson?" he asked, his voice smooth but sharp at the edges. And just like that, the lies started. Troy cleared his throat and jumped in first. "She tripped on the stairs," he said, chuckling like it was a silly family story. Kendra nodded too fast. "She's been a little off lately. Memory, balance. We've been worried." I let them talk for a moment, let them weave their little story. Then I raised my voice, calm but clear. "This condo is 1 level. Has been since we moved in. There are no stairs." The room went still. Troy looked at me like I had betrayed him. Kendra's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. I turned to Malcolm and spoke plainly, like I was reporting a chart. He pushed me. I raised my arm to block the blow. I heard the bone snap. "It's a defensive fracture, mid-shaft radius." Malcolm nodded, as if he already knew but wanted it on record. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a manila folder, opened it, and held up the X-ray against the dining room chandelier. The shadow of the break glowed for all to see. "This type of break doesn't happen from falling forward," he said to the room. "It happens when someone's arm is up, protecting their face from a strike." There were no more lies after that. Troy sat down hard, suddenly quiet. Kendra looked like she wanted to disappear. The co-workers around the table shifted uncomfortably, looking everywhere but at me. Malcolm didn't look at them. He looked at me. "Thank you for your clarity," he said, and that's when I realized I wasn't shaking anymore. My hands, my chest, steady. The fear that had been wrapped around me for days started to lift just a little. It didn't vanish, but it moved. It made room for something else. Something like power, like ownership. My voice hadn't cracked once. I had spoken the truth in my own home, at my own table. And this time, someone had listened. Malcolm stayed standing beside me, while one of his investigators stepped toward Troy, asking calmly if there was a safe place they could talk in private. Troy looked from me to Malcolm and back again, realizing too late that this wasn't about conversation. It was about consequence. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry. It was in the room now, real and visible, right there in black and white on the X-ray. I sat up straighter, the pain in my arm still there but dulled by something stronger. This wasn't over, but it had started. Finally. I had waited, watched, held my silence through humiliation and betrayal. But now the silence was broken. The story was mine again, and I wasn't going to let it be twisted anymore. Malcolm held my X-ray up toward the chandelier, the film catching the light and turning the fracture line into something almost beautiful. A crack through glass, clean and sharp. He turned it just enough so everyone at the table could see it, including Troy, who looked like he'd swallowed a mouthful of gravel. "This is a mid-shaft radius break," Malcolm said, calm and steady. "Classic defensive injury. Happens when someone raises their arm to block a blow." The silence in the room was thick. Troy tried to laugh, that forced kind of laugh he used when he was cornered. "She's confused," he said, waving one hand. "You know, she's not as sharp as she used to be." My heart thumped once, hard. Kendra nodded quickly, too quickly. "Mama's been forgetting things. It's been getting worse." That was it. That lie, from her mouth, that's what pushed me to move. I didn't ask permission. I looked straight at Malcolm and said, "Get the red folder, locked drawer, credenza." My voice didn't shake. I watched Malcolm walk over, retrieve it, and place it on the table like it was a loaded weapon. When he opened the folder and laid out the donation papers and the contract with the hospital foundation, the temperature in the room dropped. Nobody spoke. The documents were clear. 10 years ago, I gave the condo to the foundation in exchange for lifetime occupancy. It wasn't mine to give away. It never was. Troy's face changed shape right in front of me, from smug to confused to something close to panic. Kendra blinked like she couldn't read what was in front of her. "You did this behind my back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes on the page while the investigators stepped closer to Troy and began asking questions, low and direct. About the storage units in the basement, about cash payments, about names in a black notebook. I watched him shift in his chair, mouth opening and closing, the sweat starting to gather under his collar. I hadn't known about any of it, not the gambling debts, not the men he owed, not the way he used my address on shady paperwork. Each answer the investigators pulled from him hit like a stone dropping in water. I could feel it rippling across the room. Kendra was starting to unravel. She reached for Troy's arm, but he shook her off. "It was just a couple of loans," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought he had it under control." Then she let it slip, just a little too loud, just a little too late. "I only signed Mama's name that one time. I didn't know he'd actually use it." The room froze. My chest went still. I looked at her and something inside me cracked, not like a bone, but like a promise. That wasn't Troy's hand. That was hers. My daughter, forging my signature on a home equity line behind my back. The pain of that ran deeper than anything Troy had done. I couldn't even speak. There was nothing to say. She had crossed a line I didn't even know she could see. And for what? To protect a man who never protected her? I stared down at the dining table, at the mess of papers and lies and silence. Everything that had been hidden was now out in the open. There was no going back. No smoothing this over with a quiet phone call or a closed-door apology. The truth was out, and it was ugly. But I also felt clean, stripped bare. Yes, but clean. No more pretending. No more swallowing pain to keep the peace. This was my house, my life, and I had let people live in it like they owned me. Not anymore. Malcolm didn't say a word while the weight of the silence sat on all of us. Then, in that low, even voice, he said, "We'll be placing Mr. Carter under arrest, and we're opening a financial investigation. Kendra, you may be implicated. I suggest you seek legal counsel immediately." Her gasp sounded like something breaking in her throat. Troy didn't say anything. He didn't fight. He knew. The investigators stood him up and cuffed him right there at my dining room table, beside the roast he'd carved like a king. His eyes never met mine. Kendra stood frozen, eyes wide and full of panic, like a little girl who just realized the fire she set couldn't be put out. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. I sat still in my chair, hands folded in my lap, cast resting heavy across my stomach. My body still hurt, my heart still ached. But my spine had never felt straighter. I watched the man who hurt me be led out of my house in silence, and I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. Because the truth had done what I couldn't do alone. It had blown the roof off the lie we'd all been living in. As the door closed behind them, I looked at the mess they left behind. Papers, broken trust, a daughter I barely recognized, and knew something had ended. I wasn't sure what was left standing yet, but I knew this. I had chosen the truth, no matter the cost. I had pulled every secret into the light. And I wasn't going to hide in the shadows ever again. The room was cold and quiet except for the soft tick of the clock on the wall. I sat in a hard gray chair at a metal desk inside a small room at the station. My cast rested awkwardly on the table, throbbing, heavy, swollen underneath. Across from me sat a female detective, her expression calm but firm. She slid a stack of papers toward me and asked, gently but clearly, "Do you want to request a restraining order and press full charges?" Her voice didn't push, didn't coax. It just waited. I didn't answer right away. My mouth went dry. The question wasn't hard to understand. It was hard to carry. I looked down at the forms. Words like assault, protective order, testify, fraud sat there in black ink, waiting for me to say yes to them all. My first thought wasn't about myself. It was about my grandbabies. What happens to them if Troy goes to prison? If Kendra gets dragged into court? What happens when they ask where their daddy is? That kind of guilt don't just sit in your chest. It spreads. Through your stomach, your back, your throat. I felt sick. I kept seeing Kendra as a little girl, holding my hand too tight in the grocery store, whispering she didn't like it when Daddy yelled. I had tried so hard to give her a different kind of life. When she married Troy, I wanted to believe he'd be better. When I started noticing his tone, his control, I swallowed it. Told myself it wasn't my business. Told her to stand by her man, because that's what I'd been told. Because I thought being a good wife mattered more than being right. And now here we were, her looking at a possible charge for signing my name behind my back, and me staring at a stack of papers that could burn everything down. I thought about how many times I praised her for keeping the peace. I thought about how I taught her to survive quietly instead of fight back. I helped build the very silence that let Troy walk into my home like he owned it. I built it with good intentions, but it still became a trap. The detective didn't push me, she just waited. My brain split into two voices, the nurse and the mother. The nurse in me counted the bruises, the x-ray, the missing records, the medical evidence. She listed risk factors, told me how patterns repeat. She reminded me of every woman I'd treated in the ER who came in saying, "It only happened once," or "He didn't mean it." The mother in me just wanted my daughter back, wanted the babies safe, wanted to believe this could still be turned around without tearing it all to shreds. "Can I protect them without hurting them?" I whispered, not sure who I was asking. The detective just nodded toward the pen. "You can only protect the truth now," she said. I picked up the pen with my left hand. It shook a little, but I gripped it anyway. I signed every line. Restraining order. Full charges, testimony, fraud report. I didn't skip a thing. I told them what happened. Every detail. I told them about the forged loan papers, how I knew Kendra had signed my name. I didn't soften it. I didn't explain it away. I told them I wanted them to consider her cooperation, the kids, whatever they needed to when they made decisions. But I didn't take my name off any complaint. I asked for protection, not just for me, but for my home, for my peace, for the chance to breathe again without checking behind doors. When I finished, I slid the papers back across the desk. My hand was damp with sweat. I could feel my whole body trembling just beneath the surface, but I didn't break. The detective gathered the papers, said thank you, and stood. That was it. No applause, no relief, just the cold weight of having made a choice that could shatter what was left of my family. Walking out of that room, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. I moved like I was underwater, everything too bright, too quiet. I saw people passing in the hallway, voices echoing in the distance, but none of it touched me. The world kept moving, and I was just trying to stay on my feet. I stepped outside, the air biting at my skin, and for a second I wanted to turn back. I wanted to undo it all, beg for a redo, promise to be quiet if it meant Kendra wouldn't hate me. But that's not how survival works. That's not how truth works. You either name the fire or let it burn you slowly. I chose to name it. I chose to say, this is what he did. This is what she did. This is what I'm no longer willing to carry alone. I stood in that cold air, cast throbbing, knees unsteady, and realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. I chose me. Not in some pretty, self-help kind of way. Not to prove a point. I chose me because if I didn't, they would have kept choosing for me. They would have written me out of my own story, turned me into the crazy old woman who fell down some stairs. I chose me, even knowing it might mean Kendra wouldn't forgive me, even knowing it could break what little was left. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll get my daughter back. But I do know this. The moment I signed those forms, I stopped letting guilt speak louder than truth. I stopped protecting people who never protected me. I stopped mistaking silence for love. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like a woman who had finally, painfully, taken her life back. The moment she stepped into the hospital's family room, I felt the air in my chest lock tight. Kendra looked smaller somehow. Red-rimmed eyes, wrinkled t-shirt, hair pulled back like she hadn't slept. She didn't speak right away. No hug, no greeting. Just sat down across from me like she was sitting down to interrogate a stranger. Her eyes were hard, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "How could you do this to us?" Not him, not Troy. Me. Like I was the one who shattered everything. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, searching for the girl who used to hide behind my legs in grocery stores, the girl who once thought I could fix anything with a hug. She was gone. What sat in front of me now was a grown woman trying to make me carry the weight of a man's sins, so she wouldn't have to face her own. She let it all out in one long spill. "You overreacted. You should have talked to us first. You called Malcolm behind my back. You made this public. You sent Troy to jail. You ruined our family." Each sentence landed like a slap. Her voice cracked in parts, but she never stopped. She talked like she was defending herself in court, like she thought if she said it fast enough, I'd agree it was all a mistake. I sat there, letting her throw it all at me, and every word cut deeper than the last, not because they were true, but because she believed them. Because she had decided her loyalty to that man mattered more than what he'd done to me. I kept my mouth shut until she ran out of steam, until the fire in her eyes flickered just a little. Then I sat up straighter and spoke, steady and quiet. I told her about her father, not the version she remembers, the playful one with the Sunday jokes and the payday ice cream, but the nights she never saw, the ones where I wore long sleeves to church and smiled too wide. I told her how I used to whisper to myself that he's just stressed, how I made excuses for bruises like they were part of some unspoken marriage vow. "I didn't just stay quiet," I said. "I taught you to stay quiet too. I taught you that a man's anger was something to work around, to cover, to live with." Her face went pale. I didn't stop. I helped shape the woman who would stand there while her husband broke her mother's arm and not call for help. My throat burned saying it, but I said it anyway, because it was the truth. I needed her to see the damage didn't start with Troy. It started with silence, and I'd carried that silence for too long. She didn't cry. I saw her eyes well up, but she blinked fast and looked away. I told her I loved her. I said it without shame. "You're still my daughter," I said. "I will help you get a lawyer. I'll help you find a therapist. But I won't lie for him. And I won't pretend that what he did didn't happen." My voice didn't rise, but I could feel it shaking with the force of how much I wanted her to understand. "If he gets out, he will not come near me, or the kids, not ever again. That's not a threat. That's the boundary." She shook her head like a child who didn't want to hear the answer. "You're choosing a stranger over your own family," she snapped. I wanted to scream that it was her who had chosen a stranger, someone who manipulated and used her. But I didn't. I let her stand up and walk out. The door shut behind her harder than she probably meant. I stayed seated, gripping the arm of the chair, not trusting my legs to hold me yet. My heart felt like it had been split down the middle. A part of me wanted to chase her down the hallway, tell her I didn't mean it, tell her we could fix it. But I didn't move, because another part of me, stronger now, knew that chasing her would mean stepping back into the same pattern, protecting her from pain while letting mine fester. I sat there in that empty room, the clock ticking loud, and breathed through the ache in my chest. She didn't see it now. She might not for a long time, but I hadn't turned on her. I'd finally turned toward myself, and toward the grandbabies, who deserved a different story than the one we'd been repeating. I stood up slowly, cast weighing down my right side, and looked at the empty chair across from me. The space between us felt miles wide, but under all that hurt, something else had settled. A clear line. For the first time, I wasn't twisting myself to hold the family together with tape and prayer. I wasn't the glue anymore. I was the boundary, the line between what would be allowed and what would not. And I wasn't crossing it again, not even for her. I walked out of that room with my head up, pain in my chest, but a calm under it. The kind that comes when you know you did what needed to be done, even if it cost you, even if it broke your own heart to do it. The wooden bench under me felt harder than it should have, like the courtroom itself was pressing against my spine. I sat still, purse strap wrapped tight in my left hand, cast resting heavy on my lap. When the clerk called my name, something inside me braced. I stood carefully, legs stiff, and walked toward the witness stand. Every step felt louder than it needed to be. I saw the jurors watching. I saw Troy at the defense table, looking bored, smug. My cast was still visible, the bruises around the edge yellowing but clear. I sat down, adjusted the microphone with my good hand, and waited. The defense lawyer stood, slick and smooth, and gave me that polite, practiced smile meant to disarm. It didn't work. He launched right in, not with questions about what happened, but about me, my age, my memory, my state of mind. I knew the tactic. Make me seem fragile, emotional, confused. For a second, it worked. That old shame flared up in my gut, the kind that says, don't make trouble. But I didn't back down. I straightened my spine and reminded myself who I was. I answered each question like I was explaining a diagnosis to a patient, slow, steady, clinical. I raised my right arm to block him. The impact was direct here. I pointed carefully, and I heard a sharp snap. The bone broke mid-shaft. A defensive fracture, not a fall. He tried to twist my words, asking if maybe I was confused, if maybe I fell and imagined the rest. I looked him in the eye and said, I've treated over 100 fractures in my career. I know what happened to my body. He moved on, trying to make it about the condo, implying I was unstable for giving it away without telling my daughter. Was that paranoid behavior? He asked. Or controlling? I explained, calm as I could, that the condo was legally donated 10 years ago to the hospital foundation, and that I had a right to live in it until I died. No one, especially not Troy, had a claim to it. Not ever. I watched the jurors closely while I spoke. Their expressions changed when I mentioned the hospital clause, when I said Troy had no legal right to the property. Some leaned forward when I described how he locked me in the guest room, how he took my phones, how I had to dig out a flip phone to call for help. I told the truth. Not the polished, easy version. The raw one. The one with humiliation and pain still clinging to the edges. Malcolm stood when it was his turn, and when he looked at me, I didn't see pity. I saw support. Each question he asked steadied me like a hand pressed between my shoulder blades. We walked through the timeline, the documents, the injuries. He let me be the one to say it. He hurt me over a home he could never have. When I said it, I felt something settle in the room, like truth had finally gotten loud enough to be heard. When it was over, I stepped down from the stand. My legs were shaking, but I held my head up. I didn't look at Troy. I didn't need to. I had said what I came to say. I returned to my seat, heart thudding hard against my ribs, hands cold, but I wasn't scared. Not anymore. The courtroom faded to a quiet hum while the judge reviewed the charges and the jury whispered in and out of the room. When they came back and the judge read the verdict, guilty on the assault, guilty on the financial fraud tied to the storage scheme, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't smile. I just felt tired and relieved, like I'd been holding my breath underwater and finally surfaced. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something quieter, heavier, the weight of having been believed, really believed. The courtroom emptied slowly. Reporters lingered near the hallway. I ignored them. I didn't want a spotlight. I just wanted to go home. As I stepped outside, the late afternoon sun hit my face and made me squint. The air smelled like rain was coming. I stood there for a moment, arms crossed, cast awkward, breathing in the quiet. I had done what I needed to do, not just for the legal record, for myself, for every part of me that had been dismissed, silenced, doubted. The system, for once, had heard a black woman's pain and chosen to believe it. That mattered. It didn't undo what was broken. It didn't fix what Kendra and I had lost, but it mattered. I had told the truth, and someone finally listened. I walked to the car slowly, every step carrying the weight of what had happened, and also the space of what hadn't. No apology from Kendra, no tears from Troy, no miracle, just the plain, solid ground beneath my feet. And for now, that was enough. I had spoken for myself, not through anyone else. I didn't flinch. I didn't fold. And whatever came next, healing, rebuilding, silence, I knew I'd face it without bending who I was ever again. I earned that much. The truth came out of my mouth, steady and clear. And for the first time, that was more than just survival. It was power. The knife wobbled a little in my left hand, but I kept steady pressure as I sliced through the chocolate frosting. The cake wasn't homemade, just a small one from the grocery store. But it was what I wanted. I sat alone at my dining table, the one that had seen too many fights and too many silences, now scrubbed clean, free of drama and tension. The air felt still, like even the house was catching its breath. No shouting, no slammed doors. No heavy footsteps pacing the hallway like I needed permission to breathe. Just the soft ticking of the clock in the living room and the scent of sugar in the air. I cut myself a thick slice and placed it on a plate without looking over my shoulder. For once, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I leaned back in my chair and looked around. The locks on the doors were new. I paid for them myself. The spare key now lives with Ms. Bryant next door, not in Kendra's purse. My red folder, the one that held all the truths nobody wanted to see, was locked in a fireproof box under my bed. No more hiding it in the back of a drawer, hoping people would respect boundaries they never intended to. I used to feel like I had to make myself small in my own home, like being the nice one was more important than being safe. Not anymore. I picked up my fork with my left hand, clumsy, a little awkward but stronger than last week, and took a bite of the cake. It tasted rich and heavy, and something about it made my eyes sting, even though I wasn't sad. Not exactly, just full. I'd started going to a support group at the church. I almost didn't show up that first night, sat in the car for 10 minutes before walking in. But when I heard those other women, different ages, different stories, say things I thought only lived in my head, I felt something break open. In a good way, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I wasn't the only one who thought love meant endurance. Sitting in that circle, hearing someone say, I thought if I kept the peace, the pain would stop. It felt like someone had cracked my ribcage and let the light in. I've gone back every week since. I don't always talk. Sometimes I just listen. But even that feels like healing. Not the clean, pretty kind. The slow, messy kind that leaves scars. I still miss my daughter. That doesn't go away. I miss the sound of her voice when she used to call me after work. I miss the babies. My grandbabies, who didn't ask for any of this. But I've learned that missing someone doesn't mean I have to let them hurt me. I set boundaries through the court, with her lawyer. If she wants me to see the kids, it has to be in public places. Neutral ground. No Troy, No surprise visits. She didn't like it, but I didn't budge. I don't say yes just to avoid conflict anymore. I don't leave the door cracked in case they want back in. If they come back, it'll be through the front door, honest and respectful. Or not at all. I can live with that now. Another bite of cake. A little too sweet, a little too soft, but it tasted like something solid, like a promise I made to myself. The woman who sat at this table weeks ago couldn't have imagined cutting a slice for herself without guilt, without fear. That version of me would have checked the clock, checked the mood, waited until everyone else was full. But this woman, this version, I cut the first piece. I eat with my left hand, slowly, steadily, not apologizing for needing time or for healing unevenly. The grief is still there. It sits beside me like an old friend. But so does freedom. And for once, they're not fighting for space. They just exist together, side by side. I cleared the plate, carried it to the sink, and rinsed it under warm water. My movements were careful, but not afraid. I dried my hands, turned out the light, and walked through my quiet, safe home without looking over my shoulder. The cast was still on, but the bruises had faded, and I could feel strength returning to the places that had gone numb. I turned toward the hallway, ready to settle into bed, and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, just for a second. And I looked whole. Not perfect, not healed, but whole. I whispered under my breath, just loud enough for the silence to catch it. You made it. Then I smiled. Just a little. But it was real. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. It truly means a lot. If you felt something while listening, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so please share your city or country in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the other real stories we share here. There are many more like mine that deserve to be heard. Your support keeps this space alive, and I'm genuinely grateful for every one of you. With love and respect, until next time.